Okay, well, we have a lot to discuss tonight. We're going to be talking about one of the hottest topics around, and it's writers and artificial intelligence. So I hope you want to take some notes, and I'll try to walk you through this. Well, first of all, you have to realize that we are in the wild west of artificial intelligence when it comes to really everything in our lives. Today, I don't know if you heard on the news, but Scarlett Johansson is now suing, I think it's OpenAI, because they've allegedly stolen her voice. So, and used it for some kind of program. So you can, it's the arts, it's artists, it's writers, it's actors. It's really affecting publishing, as well as many other fields, medicine. So we're gonna talk about it today specifically for writers. And when I first thought about artificial intelligence, I thought about Westworld, and so this is kind of where I kind of started and got this idea about the robots are coming. In this presentation, we're going to be talking about what is AI. Some of the copyright basics will really underlie the whole artificial intelligence issue, the legal issues, what is fair use, what is the government doing, and what you as writers can do to protect yourself. Well, first of all, what is AI and where does it begin? Well, AI we know it's an algorithm. It's a means and a process of harvesting information that's out there on the internet and then using it to generate new information. Now, part of the problem is that when it's harvested, often it's harvested without getting the permission of the underlying copyright owner. So that brings us back to our first topic, which I really have to talk to you about, and that is copyright. And what is a copyright? Well, we're all familiar with this little C with a circle, this copyright bug. And that is the government protection through the Copyright Office. And it does everything from protecting any type of artistic work. So we've got literary works, films, poems, broadcasts, paintings, blogs, anything that is an original work of art is protected by the copyright law. Now, the copyright owner is the person who is the author or the original person who creates this work, except if they're work for hire. And a work for hire is, let's say, you're a photographer that gets hired by the New York Times or the Detroit News to take a photograph. You are not the owner of that photograph. You've been hired as a freelancer. So you're not entitled to that copyright protection. And I want you to know that merely coming up with an idea does not make you an author. You have to take that idea and turn it into an intrinsic form in order for you to be considered an author. Now, what are some of the key elements of copyright? Well, first of all, it gives you the right to copy, to reproduce whatever you create. If you're a writer, obviously you can reproduce your books. You can put them on Amazon. You can, go to a publisher. You can copy the books. Gives you the right to distribute them. If you wanted to print them yourself, like Pablo did, and start your own self-publishing press, that allows you to do that under the copyright law. If you're a playwright or a film, you publicly perform. If you're an artist, it gives you the right to publicly display your work or on the internet, or in a gallery or wherever, and derivative work. Now, derivative works are really interesting because I want you to think about a copyright as your underlying work is the trunk of a tree. And all of the branches that come off that tree are what's known as the derivative works. So for example, we have this little golem here. Out of him, you can make a comic book or a movie, TV show, video game, or toy. So those are the branches that really come off that original work, that original little character. So that's sometimes those branches have more value than the actual copyright underlying work itself. So what are some of the key elements of a copyright? Well, first of all, it's very easy to create. From the moment you put your fingers on the keyboard, you pick up a pen and put it to a piece of paper, you are the author. You do not have to apply for registration with the Copyright Office. It lasts for the life of the author plus 70 years. And as I said, you don't have to register it, but I always recommend to people that they do, because for $45, you become part of a database so that people will know that you are owner of the copyright. And should there be any infringement in the future, you have prima facie evidence that you are the owner of that underlying work. So how does artificial intelligence play into all this? Well, artificial intelligence, there's 3 different types of artificial intelligence. There's machine learning, which is a computer code or an algorithm that goes through and culls information. For example, if you have a program where you're on cars.com and you want to figure out what is the car and what is a truck, it's a very simple method of distinguishing between different types of objects. There's deep learning, which is a subset of that, which goes deeper and asks the computer to create more complex tasks. And we're going to talk about that in a second. And then we've got the robotic process automation, which are those bots. You know, when you go on a website and it pops up, hi, can I help you? And you're starting to chat, you know, with the computer. That's the different types. So you got the bots, you got the deep learning tasks, and you've got that very simple machine learning, which distinguishes between very simple objects. Now, over the past, I would have to say year, not even a year, we've had so many programs that are examples that have exploded in the arts. And these are a few of them that I wanted to talk about. The first are text generators. And that's something that we as writers are probably using more of than any of these other programs. You know, and those are what are known as large language models. They are the colors and they are the generators. We have OpenAI, which created ChatGPT. Google has its Bard. There's one called Writer, Pseudo-Write, Shortly AI, and Novel AI. Those are some of the main programs that are involved with writers. Music generators, Google's got one, OpenAI has got one. Video, we've got one from Google, and we've got one that's called Midjourney, and I'm going to be talking about that in a minute. And also image generators. And when it comes to litigation and the state of the law, right now, the 2 biggest areas that are being litigated are the text generators, which affect writers, and the image generators, which are affecting artists at this point. Now, as I said before, how does AI function? Well, what it does is it sends its algorithms through the internet, and it literally steals information. It harvests information. And then what it does is it takes that information and it outputs material that's generated. So it's generating brand new material from existing material that it doesn't necessarily own. Now, we have one thing that you should know is that when they do these programs, it's not like on a one-to-one basis. They have to call billions and billions and billions of bytes in order to create the programs like ChatGPT. And as I indicated, it really is an infringement of copyrighted work. Because not only there's no licensing right now where you can go to a writer, ask them if OpenAI can use your information. There's no way to do that right now. So they are illegally stealing this information. And not only are they stealing it from the internet and things that are out there, but they're going to the dark web and they're going to pirated sources as well. And as I said, you know, there's very little that's being done in AI licensing. And I think this is the area where we're going to see most of the protections that are going to arise for writers, because there's no other way for us to regulate how our material is being used. So Sarah Silverman was really the first one who stood up and said, hey, you're stealing my material. You're going ahead and you're taking my book. You've ripped it off the internet. You're consuming it from pirated websites. And the problem with Sarah's case is that she has been really unable to prove any damages as a result of this litigation. This is something that was started almost a year ago, and they have been in and out of court over this thing. And the judges have been very liberal in allowing her to constantly amend her papers to try to gain proof to show that she has been damaged. But damages are the real, it's very, very hard to prove. AI is also, what Sarah is saying is, she's saying, you're stealing my material and you're using it. Now, we have a group of writers who've been working with the Authors Guild, and they've commenced litigation. We have John Grisham, George R.R. Martin, Jodé Millman, Mickey Donnelly. These guys are also suing in New York, claiming that not only is OpenAI stealing their material, but they are publishing material under their name, pretending to be them. So that takes it to a whole different step. We're not only talking about the harvesting, we're talking about generating books to mislead the public. And this litigation is ongoing in New York. And my take is that the New York courts are going to be much more liberal about allowing these claims than the California courts. Right now, it's kind of a bi-coastal situation. There's not much going on in the Midwest, but you got to keep your eyes on both coasts to see how the litigation is going to pan out. Now, one of the things that's also involved is visual artists, as I hinted at. And what's been going on is illustrators are also getting into the act, because they're claiming that these programs, Stability AI, DeviantArt, Midjourney, and Runway, have been culling again the internet, stealing their work, and then creating works that infringe upon their own, and also using them to train their models. And we all know about Microsoft and OpenAI. In December of last year, the New York Times said, look, you're stealing my articles. We have billions and billions of dollars invested in our newspapers, and you're just coming through and you are just ripping us off like nobody's business. This, again, is a much more complicated litigation because it involves the Digital Management Copyright Act, unfair competition, trademark dissolution. You're not just talking about writers, you're talking about a business on a much larger scale. And this is another one to keep an eye on. Now, this is a really good example of how a work has been ingested and then spit out. And this was a work that you can see, we have the Getty images. This was the original image. And Stability AI went in and culled it. And then they produced one that looks very, very similar. It's not exact, but it's obvious that it's based upon this particular, image. Now, another area of copyright that is related to all of this, and this is the principal defense that OpenAI and Google and all of these companies are using to establish their right or their alleged right to use this material that's on the web. And that's called fair use. And what fair use means is that you have copywritten material that's not in the public domain. We're talking about stuff that's protected by copyright that they believe that they have the right to use. Now, under the copyright law, you have to understand that material, if it's used for non-commercial, educational, nonprofit purposes, such as criticism or commentary, then you can use it. Now, for example, if you're an educational writer, you can use it for news reporting, or criticism, or parody, things like that. And the nature of the copyright, and these four categories are the classifications that a court will look at to determine whether or not something is entitled to fair use protection or not. The second is the nature of the copyright. And generally, the courts will allow for the use of non-creative materials more so than creative materials. Because obviously there's much more human work or creativity that goes into the creation of let's say, fiction work, then that's how they view it anyway. Now, you can only use a small percentage in order to qualify for fair use. And I remember running into this, as a matter of fact, when I was at Eastern, because what the professors would do is they would go through and they would print their own manuals rather than us having by case books. So if I was taking a class on, let's say, Mark Twain, they would be reprinting Twain articles, or if, I took one on realism, and, we did poetry and we did short stories, and the professors would literally copy 100% verbatim and then sell these books. Now that's against the law. That is a violation of fair use, because they're clearly infringing upon the copyrights of Mark Twain and Frost, Robert Frost. You can't do that. You can only use a little bit. And again, it cannot affect our fourth category, the commercial viability of the underlying work. So if you're going to use something for fair use, it's really not supposed to be for commercial purposes. Now, there was a huge case that came down in 2023, and I don't know if any of you knew about this, but the Supreme Court addressed this issue of fair use. And this was a photograph of Prince that was taken by a gal named Lynn Goldsmith in 1981. And to honor Prince, what Vanity Fair did was they took this image without the permission of the artist, and they changed it, made it kind of Andy Warholish, and they did a transformation. And what they claimed was that they had changed the image so much that Goldsmith wasn't entitled to really to any royalties or any kind of notation or recognition. But the Supreme Court said, hey, first of all, you took her image, and not only did you use it, you didn't use it for non-commercial purposes. You created these Warhol images to make money off of Goldsmith's work. So as a result, they held that this was a violation of fair use. It did not constitute fair use. So it's the whole issue of transformation. And that's something we should think about as writers, because let's say we write a book and someone else comes along and writes a play or a movie script without our permission, based upon claiming fair use. That doesn't wash it, because they're doing it for commercial purposes. So I want to keep this issue in mind for you. Now, what is the Copyright Office doing about it? Well, they are being very, very serious and very diligent about trying to figure out how they're entering into this Wild West. They have been having hearings. They have been asking for opinions. They have been having listening sessions. They've done a study on copyright and AR. They've been having webinars, and they've been issuing very strict decisions. And those decisions indicate that in order to get copyright protection, the work must be created by a human. And we're going to talk about that. Now, again, it has to be under the copyright law, a human must be an author. And there have been cases where they've been giving, like they gave a monkey a camera, and he took pictures. His pictures were not subject to copyright protection because he was not a human, so the monkey didn't get copyright protection. And another question is, and this is where the gray area is. How much input can a machine have in a product or project so that it crosses the line between what is human generated and what is machine generated? When does a work that's created or assisted by AI, when is it entitled to copyright protection? Well, this is a really interesting case. And again, this is a case that involves a graphic artist who created a comic book. This was Christina Kashtanova. And this is really the first case that was decided on this topic, and really right now is the law of the land. Now, Christina went ahead and she did all of the text and all the layout for her comic book. But what she did was she did not create all of the visual art that went with a graphic novel. That was all created through Midjourney. So she submitted it to the Copyright Office for protection, and they said, well, the artwork wasn't created by you, so all the protection we can give you is for the layout and for the text itself. So you have to understand again, they took a very hard line because they know that this was going to be a huge hot button issue in the future. Now, I had a personal experience with this because my last book was called The Empty Kayak. And as most of you know, when you have a publisher, they'll send you some mock-ups for covers. And when I received my covers, they gave me 3, I literally broke out in tears because I did not think that any of them represented the story that I'd spent so much time creating. So I just taken a class on copyright and AI, and I heard about this program called DALL-E 2. So I went on the program and I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and type in my narrative. And my narrative was an empty red kayak floating down a river underneath a suspension bridge in the national park style of an art book cover. And I ended up getting, 200 or 300 different artworks, little thumbnails. And I went through them all. And again, I picked the one that I thought was most interpretive of my mystery. So I think you can guess what's happening. When the book came out, I went ahead and submitted my copyright application. And not only, if you want to use OpenAI and you don't want to have to pay them, you have to give them credit for the cover work, for their contribution. So I did that in my copyright application. So I get this very nice letter back saying, I'm working on your copyright. However, you have to tell us how much of the artwork you created and how much was created by the algorithm. Because as you know, artwork, any work that's protectable has to be created by a human. So I said, I'm going to fess up here because maybe I tweaked it. Maybe I worked on the colors. Maybe I didn't do the layout. I did the layout for the typography, but I did not, get my paints and brushes out and paint this piece of artwork. So I had to write them a letter, and they redacted that cover as being protected from copyright. So you see, this is all a process that you have to go through. And if any of you want to take a screenshot, this is a step-by-step guide as to how to get, if your work contains AI, you really have to let the Copyright Office know. You could lie, but I think, we're all writers, we're all very honest and truthful people, and you really want your work to be protected under the law. So what you have to do is, if you had work that's incorporated AI, you have to tell them. And you're going to let them know by saying, look, this is under the author section. This is what my contribution, and this is what the machine created. And then when you go to the limitation of claim, again, you're going to say certain portions have to be excluded because they were created by artificial intelligence. And again, do not list the AI company as your co-author because they're not. Then you'll never get protection. So what is Congress doing about this? Well, honestly, Congress has been making a lot of noise, and they've been trying to do things. They've been, like Chuck Schumer's been very active in holding forums about, tech. The Committee on Commerce and Science and Transportation has been looking into it as far as consumer protection and product liability is concerned. There was a copyright, there's a copyright law research group that has been issuing reports. There is an act that is pending in the House of Representatives. It's called the AI Foundation Model Transparency Act. But again, it's really related more to the FTC, and protecting goods and trade than it is for artists. And we're really behind the ball because the European Union has already approved an act that's up and running, which protects copyrights of the artists when it comes to AI and transparency. But we're behind the 8 ball, and I don't understand why it's taking us so long, to be honest with you. We know that the president's been quite active about this because he's been trying to crack down on all of this. and they've been doing, he had a summit and he issued an executive order. And, as we know, executive orders really, in this particular instance, really don't have a lot of weight because he has asked the major tech companies to reveal and be transparent about what they're doing. And of course, you can't force them. His executive order has no legal force, but it was a goodwill mission, and we appreciate the fact that he's taking the matter very seriously. So how does the publishing industry feel about this? And I took a course with Publishers Weekly, and believe me, they are high on this because most major publishers see AI as the most transformative invention since Gutenberg's press. At first, they thought it was going to be the ebook, but it turns out the ebook, that's more of a format. This is a brand new technology, which is revolutionizing the whole field. The publishers see it as a time-saving and organizational efficiency. Book marketers see it as a tool. They can do blog posts, marketing posts, social media posts. And, unfortunately, it's causing a loss of jobs, the entry-level jobs in the book marketing business, because no longer do you need, also in the advertising business, a lot of copywriters are not going to be getting jobs, entry-level jobs, because all of this is going to be done by artificial intelligence. But it's also automating the process. It's making it quicker for books to get to press because you've got artificial intelligence, which can create table of contents and indexes and keywords, and it's shrinking the time and it's reducing the costs of production. Now, what does Amazon say? And I don't know if any of you have worked in AI and want to post your book on Amazon, but they are asking authors to detail whether a work is AI generated. And what that means is if you go to ChatGPT and say, write a storybook about the first year of the life of a child, and then you publish that as your own, that is AI generated or AI assisted. And I think most of us today do some kind of work with AI assistance. For example, if you use ProWriter or you use Grammarly, those are all AI generated programs. Excuse me. So, but Amazon is asking authors to reveal, has it been generated by AI or has it been assisted by AI? Now, there are a couple of ways that we can look at AI. Is it a friend? Sure, it can help us research, brainstorm. It can be a personal assistant. It can help us when we're trying to write a story and we reach, we kind of hit a wall and we can ask it for suggestions. It can be a tool. It can help us with marketing materials, help me write the back blurb of my book, help me write my acknowledgements. It can help me with my marketing materials. It can also, as I gave an example, help with my cover design and the layout. And as I said, it could do a synopsis or a blurb. It can really be a time saver because there's some things we all just don't like to do. But I found when I kind of play around with this every once in a while, these programs don't have a lot of heart. And it's very easy at this point for us to know what is machine created and what is human created. However, as these algorithms continue to work, we're going to find that line is going to become a lot fuzzier. Now, AI is a foe, as again, editors are worrying that their assistants, if they rely on AI, they're not going to develop those editorial skills, break their teeth in like they did. And another problem is that AI, if they use AI to filter book submissions, there are going to be a lot of books that are going to get skipped. If because AI is just going to rule out certain submissions and queries. Also, it's, as I said, it's affecting the publishing industry because I think we're seeing a lot of dreck that's coming up and being published on, let's say, Amazon, because these are all AI generated books. And one of a really good example is in the travel industry. A lot of travel guides are being written by AI, and a lot of them are unreliable. So, we're finding that nobody is editing them. As a result, they're going out in the market. Nobody is double checking or fact checking any of this information that's inside these books. So, another problem is going to be that AI is going to be incorporated into a lot of search engines. And let's say that you would go to Google and you'd say, get me the best, the 10 best thrillers for 2023. And Google will give you, like 20 websites and, all of the listings of the thrillers that are created, that are in those websites. Well, now with AI is going to create its own list. So as a result, it's going to bump all of those other potential top 10 lists and create their own SEO experience. As I said, it's also going to cause the loss of entry-level jobs, the loss of revenue from infringement, as we've talked about, which is something that's kind of hard to prove. It's flooding the market with mediocre projects. And as I said, as technology expands, it's going to be much more difficult to determine what is a human voice as opposed to what is an AI voice. So what can you do to protect yourself? Well, first of all, set up a Google alert for your books. So anytime anybody searches your book, you'll know. It'll send you an alert. You can also send them a takedown notice. And you have to look at the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and it'll tell you how to send a takedown notice to tell whoever has touched your book or taken your book to take it down. As we talked about licensing, I know that the Authors Guild is going to try to institute a licensing. I mean, if you think about ASCAP and BMI, those are licensing organizations for music. And as a result, they somewhat protect the musicians and the writers and the songwriters. I think the trend is going to be that we're going to have the same thing happen with artificial intelligence and our publishing. It's going to take a while to create that clearinghouse, but I think that's probably going to be a very practical solution for our problems. Also, I always tell people on the inside of your cover and on the copyright page to write an opt-out notice and tell them that the notice should indicate that you are reserving the rights to your book and that you do not give anybody any license to use or reproduce your work without your permission or to use it for the training of artificial intelligence. Put it on your cover page. Please do that. Also, you have to protect what's on your website, because if you have the first chapter of your novel posted on your website, there are programs that are going to come in and grab them. And there's a good chance that you're going to be harvested. Again, you can go to the Authors Guild, and they've got a program that helps prevent against web crawlers. Okay. So more practical tips, educate yourself. Take classes like this. There's an organization that you can join for free. It's called the Copyright Alliance. And they are, they're very active in AI. They keep you up to date. They'll send you newsletters. Same thing with the Authors Guild. They've got great resources. They're involved, representing over 10,000 writers in those lawsuits for infringement. If you see a fake, report it. If you really have a problem, get an IP attorney, someone who can help you. But be careful what you share online, because anything that's out there, there are programs that can, even if it's in a PDF form, that can come in and steal your information off a PDF form. Monitor your work and become a brand. This is something I think is really important, that the more your voice becomes unique and distinct, the harder it's going to be for unlike Scarlett Johansson, it's going to be much more difficult to imitate you through a machine. So be unique, be a brand, have people know you. And this is also something that should be in the contract with your publisher, that that both of you acknowledge that artificial intelligence is out there and that neither one of you gives permission for any work to be harvested. Now, this is also a really nifty website. It's called haveibeentrade.com. And you can go there and put your name in, your work, the names of your books, and it will tell you whether or not your books have been harvested. I don't know how extensive their database is, but I think they're recently up and running. So you can also opt out on their Twitter page. So I would highly suggest, just even for fun, go to haveibeentrained.com, put your book title in there and see what pops up. I tried it and I hadn't been, but it's always good to see. So here are some of the resources that places that I like to go. And I do have a handout. If you send me an email, I can put my email in the chat. I'll be happy to send you my resource sheet. If you're interested more in fair use, you can go to Stanford University .edu, the Authors Guild, the Copyright Alliance, Copyright Society, copyright.gov. They've got a great, resources about artificial intelligence. If you're interested in politics, you can go to the White House briefings to find out exactly what that executive order said. You can go to your Amazon content page and it'll tell you exactly what you have to do in order to upload a book that's got AI in it. And what I've been doing is as issues have arisen, I have been posting blogs on my website, which is jodémillman.com/the Writers Law School. And I just recently put on the links to the Authors Guild, Copyright Alliance, Copyright Society, and this copyright.gov. So if you go to my website, click on the blog, you click on it, it'll take you right to anything you want to know about AI. So if you want the handout, you can email me at jodysusanmillman@gmail.com, or you can send me a note through my contact page at my website. And my last and final slide, I know I kind of voted through this, was that I'm giving you this information for educational purposes, and I'm not really offering any legal advice. And so that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Jody. I want to open up to questions now. If you want to go ahead and use the hand icon, if you want to say anything, or feel free to pop a question in chat. I saw something interesting that Paul wrote earlier on. Like, for example, if you use Grammarly to correct your manuscript, I mean, there's a chance that it may have touched every paragraph. So how do you address that when you're trying to explain how much AI has been used?
Well, that's AI assisted. It's not AI generated. Unless you go in and ask it to write, rewrite the whole paragraph for you. And generally they don't. It'll tell you to dot your I's. You've made, typographical error or a grammatical error. So that's not anything I think any of us have to worry about.
Okay. Interesting.
I see we have some questions in the chat. Let me see here. Okay, let's see here. Okay, Paul, did you have a question about work for hire?
I was just pointing out a clarification. It's not work for hire unless it contractually says work for hire.
Correct.
It's the way you said it implied all freelance work is work for hire.
No. It's based upon contract.
Yes.
Based upon the contract you have.
I just wanted to clarify that for people.
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't worry about Grammarly because, as you said, it's correcting your work. It's not creating work. It can though.
It can rewrite things. Yeah, that was kind of my question is, and that's where, image generators, text generators, they all can get a little confusing because, yeah, it's a very fuzzy line between, well, did I create this or didn't I create this? Whether it's, writing long text prompts for an image like you did for your cover, or using Grammarly to fix up my lousy English. It may make it all sound pretty, but if it does, did I write that then or didn't I? The ideas are mine, but like you said, ideas aren't protected.
But you have taken it, and that sentence would not have been there to correct if you hadn't created it. It's not like it created it independently.
True.
And that's the way that I look at it, because I work in pro writing aid, And, it'll suggest sentence, restructuring of sentences and things like that. And again, you're making the decision whether or not to accept those edits. It's not automatic.
But that image of the kayak on your cover would not have existed unless you had prompted it and worked through all of the
Exactly.
algorithms to get it. So,
I
but
know
yet
it.
that's not protected.
Right. I know.
Well, but I mean,
I just pointed out because it's an interesting thing, and you're right. There's a lot of gray area in this right now.
There is. And I think it's going to take a long time for it to develop because it's so new and it's really, I was reading an article in the Times, I think it was yesterday, and it's about how now physicians are using AI to consult on their diagnosis for patients. I mean, it is literally affecting every aspect of our lives. And so I really think that we're just going to have to work through this. And, and look at the teaching profession. I mean, those poor teachers, I mean, they've got to deal with kids for handing in homework that's been created by AI. You now have programs that, I forget the Turnitin. I don't know if Turnitin does the AI, but now there are programs that teachers have to use.
Yeah, I think there's a program, Do My Homework, out there that kids can enter homework problems in, and it will generate answers.
And what they're also doing is, I think the education system saying, okay, or a lot of professors that I've spoken to have said, yeah, we're going to have to live with it. So how can we incorporate it how can we incorporate it into our curriculum rather than, ignore it or, butt our head up against it? I mean, it's really entering any field. I mean, I have friends whose kids can't get jobs anymore in the pharmaceutical advertising because it's all being done by all the copies being written by AI. It's crazy. It's really crazy. Okay, what if you hire someone to paint the cover, a human, based on what you got from AI? You can't. That's, and that's unless, I think the rule is that if you've generated it yourself, let's say you have a piece of artwork and you feed it into AI and you work on it through AI, I'm not sure if there's going to be protection, but I think it would be more protectable because you created the underlying work. They're the underlying.
He is asking the other way around, I think.
Yeah.
To create the painting based on what the AI came up with. Did I read it right?
Yeah, that's what happened to me. That work was created by AI and I couldn't get, and I'm not an artist, but I fooled around with it. I mean, I played with it, changed the color, made the reds more brilliant, moved the kayak around, and they said,
that situation.
That's not actually the scenario. What she's saying is, let's say you go into DALL-E and you do a generic idea such as yours, but then I take it to an actual real live human being artist and say, here's my concept. Implement this concept. You don't have to, do an exact thing, do this, as your own, but gives you my concept of what I want,
Then I would say that would be protectable because you're just,
that's my thought.
Because it's like taking a photograph and giving it to somebody and say, okay, paint me a portrait from this photograph. The portrait's going to be the work of art. It's not the cover, it's not that AI generated work. That's the art. That's the inspiration for it.
So tell me, what's the difference? I mean, so you're a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
So if let's say that I were a judge, or maybe not, but what would you say is, how would you argue to a judge the difference between, say, I read 5,000 science fiction and fantasy books, and based upon everything I've ever written, I I write the great American science fiction novel.
Mhm.
What's the difference between me doing that and an artificial intelligence program doing that?
Okay, is the question that the artificial intelligence is going to create the work from scratch?
So
No, I
we can
think
do that.
he's
Usually
saying
it's with
he
a
trains
prompt.
himself like as an AI machine is trained.
No,
Right.
yeah, I know the point, but that's the question. The,
Well, I think that's a very good, that's a clarification point, because true enough, programs like ChatGPT require prompting.
Right.
They're not just doing it on their own,
Right.
out of their own volition.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, everything, I know when I write a book, and I know when all of us write books, we are an amalgam of what we have learned before. We have taken, I mean, we are inspired, I think, by everything we read. And as a result, that is what makes us writers. For example, being a mystery writer, I have certain conventions by which and parameters by which I have to write in order, because that's what the reader expects. And a lot of this, if you think about Agatha Christie, I mean, she's one of my favorites. I'm not rewriting Agatha Christie, but I'm being inspired by her.
Right.
And that's my original work, is an amalgam of the inspiration of what came before. Certainly, I hope it's original. I mean, that's what I think is going to sell it. And I think the difference with AI is that, okay, it is reading the same books, but it's not, it's it's machine generated. It's not, there's
So
no
is the
art
difference
to it at all.
is the difference simply, human
Yes,
versus machine?
yes.
And so, taking that then, if humans are creating the prompts, what difference does that make?
Well, a prompt is just, that's just it. It's a prompt. You're not contributing to the actual creation of that artistic work. You're just asking it a question.
Well,
That's what it is.
prompts set parameters, do they not? Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's
I mean,
a,
I don't want to be
that's,
sitting in
no,
a court of
that's
law,
a good
but
question.
I think that's one of the gray aspects of all this.
No, I agree. And I think the Copyright Office is going to have to struggle with that to find, because everybody is going to be using AI. And the question is, where is the line between what is human created and what is machine created? Is it 50-50? Is it 25-75? I mean, what is it? And I think we're just going to have to wait to see how this develops. I really don't have an answer. It's really the Wild West. I've never seen anything like this at all. And for me, it's exciting. I'm taking a class tomorrow or the next day on AI and the legal profession, because that's also, generating documents. And, there was a case here in New York where there was an attorney who was representing a woman who flew on Avianca Airlines, and she was suing them for some reason. And he handed in a brief, and the brief was written by ChatGPT. And it turns out that he didn't check the citations that were in the brief, and they were all fake.
Oh my God.
Oh, whoa.
So not only did he get censured, in the case, and his client, lost the case as a result, but now he's up for disbarment.
Wow.
So, I mean, it really is an amazing, we're living in an amazing time.
I want to go up earlier in the chat. We missed a question from Dara. She was wondering about the Google alerts. And so you set up the alert to see what's being written about your book, or if something's harvested it. But then what? What is the next action after that?
You have to look at the Digital Millennium Act, and it'll give you the steps that'll tell you how to notify whoever the infringer is. I mean, that's like a whole hour's worth of discussion, to be honest with you. There are ways to track people who have cited your work. online. And it's pretty clearly set out there how to do that. The Digital Management Millennium Act. And you can go to copyright.gov. It'll have all the information there too.
Okay, and Judith had a question too in the chat. Are you comfortable if another author uses your cover with the same title or a different title? I presume she's talking about the kayak cover. So it hasn't been copyrighted. Someone else could take it, right?
Exactly. You know, what am I going to do? You know, what am I going to do? You know, it's the, what does that say? Copying is the most sincere form of flattery. Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question.
I have kind of a question that's similar to one Paul asked. I have a book that I'm writing that's going to have 100 or maybe 150 things where I've created sketches that illustrate various points. It's not a novel, but it's a sort of an educational book where the sketches are important to understand what I'm teaching. And so I have the sketches, and if I ran those things through, I have two options. I could go to an artist and say, do all these in a novel way that looks different from the stuff that I've put, or clean them up, put better colors in and whatnot. Or I could probably go to AI to do a similar task. Probably safer to go to an artist, but is that going to create something which is not, that I'm going to have to mention it every time, you know, that it was AI created, even though I started with my own sketches?
Even if you started with your own sketches, it's ultimately going to, if the product that's going in your copywritten work is going to be AI generated, you will not get protection. Because again, there was another case against Midjourney, and there was an artist, I forget the name of the case, I apologize for that, where the artist created an image and then fed it through Midjourney and cleaned it up. And the image that they used ultimately was the Midjourney image, not the artist's underlying original work. And they denied protection.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. It really is cool stuff. You know, just got to keep your eyes open, and you have to try to protect yourself as best as you can.
I'm wondering if an answer down the road might be that there's a separate copyright process, and maybe called something different, just for AI generated things, because then, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't exist yet, but that might be the answer, because if I take the time to give something to train an AI to something, and I approve, you know, I pick the image that I want. I mean, there's some creativity in that, because I'm choosing this one out of the 100 things it gives me.
Right.
So, you know, maybe that is an answer at some point, is that it's a different kind of copyright, an AI copyright.
That's a good thought. You know, part of what the Copyright Office has been fighting is that the government wants to make it basically an enforcement arm. You know, right now, the Copyright Office, you just register things there. You know, I mean, it's for protection of artistic works. And some arms of the other government want to say, hey, Copyright Office, we want you to prosecute. We want you to make the judgment as to what is copyrightable and what isn't, and go after the people. That's not their job. But I think that's a really valuable suggestion, to have a special category just for artificial intelligence created work.
Yeah, because then people won't shy away from like lying about it. Like, if there's another way to register it, then
like an AI copyright.
Yeah.
You should write them and suggest that. Nancy, that's a really good idea. That's a really good idea.
I have a comment and a question. So Paul and I recently attended IBPA's PubU, which is a national conference on publishing, and we went to a session on AI where one of the panelists was talking about the opportunity that exists now to license your own content to these AI content generators. So this guy has a business and he's approaching authors and publishers about this opportunity. And he was viewing it like an opportunity, like it's going to happen either way. So you might as well license it and get some money. So I found that interesting. And I just wanted to make that comment. But also related to that, your recommendation on the copyright page that you would put the disclaimer, this material is not to be used. I was curious, like, okay, fine. So you write the disclaimer, but then what? Like, what if it's taken anyway? You have legal recourse, or what is the point of that?
Well, part of it, the whole copyright system is to put other people on notice that you know your rights. And I also think that you could sue for infringement. As I said, it's a hard case to prove. And but one of the nice things is that the Copyright Office has a small claims procedure, which means that if you're going to sue somebody, not everybody is J.K. Rowling. Not everybody is going to be losing millions and millions of dollars as a result of infringement. So the Copyright Office came up with a small claims procedure, which streamlines it. It's much cheaper, much faster, and they will help determine whether or not your copyright has been infringed. So it all comes down to, can you prove your damages? Can you prove, A, that you've been infringed, and B, prove your damages? And again, I don't have any answers because we have major litigation on these issues, and we just have to wait and see how they kind of filter through the system.
So this is also actually making me think about ebooks and the problem with piracy and how a lot of times the piracy that's happening is occurring like somewhere overseas and you really can't do much about it.
You can't do anything.
I almost feel like this is going to be the same thing.
Well, China will give copyright protection to artificially intelligence created work. So they don't care. China doesn't care. And and you're right, a lot of it is done overseas. And each country has their own copyright law. And like I said, we're behind the 8 ball with AI. The European Union has already gone ahead and has, stepped in and set up enforcements and set up, all the rules and regulations that are necessary. We haven't done that yet. So I know it's very frustrating. That's why you have to be educated and you have to read the articles and keep on top of this. I mean, there is not a day that goes by that I'm not reading an article about this stuff. Because it's such a rapid pace. I don't have all the answers.
Any other questions? Jodé, do you want to go back to the slide that had your contact info on it? I did put your email address in the chat.
There we go. And I do, yeah, if you email me, I'll send you the handout. And it's got all of the places where you can go that can really help you on this topic.
So what about your other covers? Were those done by people or were those also AI?
They were generated by my publisher. The first,
okay.
Hooker Avenue and Midnight Call. I was happy with those, so I didn't fool around with them. But the Empty Kayak was just, I had no idea. It looked like anime. It looked like a 5-year-old did it. I just cried. I literally cried and went to AI. So, well, I appreciate you having me tonight.
I
just posted the copyright notice I used last year for one of our books. I'm publisher for Dragon Street Press as well as a writer.
Oh, I see. Scott put it in the chat there.
So that's the notice that we included on the copyright page.
Go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Authors Guild, and that I borrowed liberally from their suggested text wording.
Yeah, they had a very good outline. I think I might have posted that on my website too. I mean, I rely upon them a lot because they're a great resource and they're really, at the forefront of what's going on with this industry.
I do have one more comment about that panel that Paula and I watched. so another speaker from the panel was a designer, and he talked about they did use AI in the sense of coming up with concepts, getting the ideas down and then creating it based on the idea. So it seems like people are using it that way.
When I'm working on a new book and I decided to see what ChatGPT was going to do with an outline. So I wrote, write me an outline. I wrote a couple pages of what my story was about, and it was totally off base as to where I wanted my story to go. So, I mean, I just every once in a while play around with it to see what the state of technology is. I mean, I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing it, but I think, for example, I mean, I hate writing synopsis. I don't know about the rest of you. I mean, I would probably put it in and see what, help me write a query letter, help me do some basic tasks, and then I'll just take it and make it my own. I mean, because we want to spend our time writing, right? All the other stuff is we have to do, not necessarily that we want to do. So, I mean, maybe the tools are there to help us.
I have one more thing to share on this. So I had recently come up with a prompt for a writing group I was working with, and the prompt was describe a picture and write about what is not in the picture. So I was using, I think, Google's version, Gemini, and I was just talking with Gemini, like, what would you write about, or what would you do for this prompt? And one of its ideas I found so interesting. It talked about maybe the picture is with two sisters and the one died when she was young, but the picture is like an AI generated version of what she would look like when she was older, and it's the two of them together. And I was like, whoa, I did right.
Whoa.
So the AI is talking about that. It blew my mind a little bit.
One of the things about AI too, I think they were training it so that it deletes sexual content, it deletes violence, and I mean, which is great. But there are some writers that write horror, things like that. So I don't know if they could use AI. It's I don't know. It's just an interesting technology. And what about this facial recognition? It's the same thing. I mean, you've got all these deep fakes. I mean, that's a whole other topic. Where you can create. Oh, that was another article I read. Creating an AI companion. How it had 10 AI generated people, that people were either in relationships with or were friends with. I mean, it's all kinds of bizarre, it's bizarre science fiction stuff. And I'm sure our science fiction writer in the group must be, excited about this.
I am writing an AI. I am writing an AI story. So
there you go.
Story about AI. So
about AI.
One of my projects, yes.
Yeah.
But so, and also, this was recently. I mean, it's been talked about, but there was another article recently in CNN or somewhere, about the whole thing about generating AI avatars of dead parents,
Right.
or dead loved ones or whatever, that you can capture enough. And if you have enough material, and as writers, we do nothing but generate material, imagine, what you could do to, essentially live forever. Mind you, my kids want to get rid of me, like, oh my God, won't he ever shut up? But
they also are accusing AI of being racist, because when people go in and they ask them to, create a scene, I forget what it was like some kind of historical scene, and everybody in the picture was white. There weren't any like indigent people or African American people, and I forget which program had to delete that item because they're trying to make it more diverse to represent the technology to society as we know it.
I think you're actually thinking of there was a reverse example of that. I think this was Gemini. One of the updates to Gemini when they released it is someone put in a prompt of, show me a picture depicting signing the Declaration of Independence.
That's what it was.
And and it did show people who were Black and who were Asian, and so it was diverse, but it was historically inaccurate.
Right.
Because they had put in enough weighting to try to make images more diverse, because they had been prior to that all white people, because that's what the majority of images on the internet are that we're being pulled from.
Right.
So yeah, it's that whole bias issue, and sometimes bias is supposed to be there, or at least in a historical sense it was there, but what are you trying to show? If you're showing the cast of Hamilton, well, that is a very diverse cast. And
Right.
it's supposed to be. That's how it was designed, but that's not an accurate
Right.
depiction.
Right. That's true. That's true.
Coincidentally, just today I was playing with it a little bit, and I had it. I asked it to show me a picture of an 8-year-old boy looking up at the stars, and half of the pictures, because I went through, show me more, show me more. About half of them were little young African American boys, and the other ones were half white. So I was kind of surprised about that. I hadn't put in any, suggestion of what the
Race or nationality.
yeah, right. So that was interesting.
Well, it certainly is fun to play around with,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
I think, it can be inspiring, as we've talked about. We'll just have to wait and see what the law, what kind of legal protection there's going to be.
I think it's really good, Jody, that you brought up the point though about kind of the pipeline issue. If you're using AI as an assistant in the office, or to, vet manuscripts or something like that, that's fine. It saves time. It makes people more productive, improves profits. Companies are happy. But what happened to all those people that were learning from those junior jobs? How do they now enter into the workplace? And how do they, get better at what they're doing? And I'm a designer, so this is something we've been facing for years and years and years, long before AI came onto the scene with, tools like Canva and, templated driven designs and things like that. And it's exactly that. I mean, you can create a typeset, a printable typeset manuscript directly from a Word document using one of these tools. And they're pretty good, I would like to think I'm better, but, they're pretty good. But if that's what you're using for all of the, let's say, all the fiction writing out there, how do people learn how to typeset them? And how do they learn what's good and what's not good? And AI just kind of takes that to a whole nother level. And it's an interesting problem because, I mean, I think of that, for like an illustrator or a designer, if AI can do what I do better than what I can do, I guess I've been automated out of a job. That's the way, automation has worked throughout history. But, it's always that unknown of at what cost.
But
Yeah.
isn't
My old,
that what art is about? I mean, art is about the freedom of expression and, the ability of all of us to speak from our hearts. And you're not going to get that from anything that's AI generated.
one
But
of my
it's
old
kind of-
history professors, said, who mourns the blacksmith,
Mhm.
Mhm.
we're not going back. And I think you said this earlier, it's like, we're going to have to learn, to live with AI,
Right,
because, it's like, you cannot put blinders on and pretend it's not there,
right, right.
So we just have to make sure that it's used for good, or at least for less evil.
Whenever I think of AI, I think of that Will Smith movie, I, Robot. And there's that scene where all the robots are just standing in rows. I kind of see them approaching us in this whole AI world, and Hollywood's having a terrible time with it too. It's there was that Scarlett Johansson issue. There was also an article in the Times about this couple. They were like on their way to the doctor's office, and they heard this ad, and these two people were voiceover artists, and they heard their voices on commercials that they'd never recorded. And it was because AI had stolen their voices. I mean, it's just all kinds of crazy things.
That should have been the title of this session. All kinds of crazy.
All kinds of crazy. I like the robots are coming. I should put the robots are here.
I was a photographer for 25 years, and I remember when digital first came about, and everybody's like, oh, I'm not going to go digital. I'll never go digital. I'm never going to use Photoshop. That's, you know, that's not staying true to photography. And it was like, this is very similar. You either adapt or you're going to drop off, right? Like
Right.
if you don't embrace the technology, you're going to be a dinosaur.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know about that because, I mean, if you look back to somebody like Mark Twain, I mean, that's work that sustains through time and it wasn't generated by artificial intelligence. Isn't there still going to be a spot for all of us who don't want to accept artificial intelligence and we just want to, you know, continue with our art as it's always been?
I mean,
or are we going to be left
spell
behind?
check is AI. I
Pardon me?
mean, spell check is AI. Your phone is AI.
That's
I
true.
mean,
That's
I'm
true.
saying more broadly, not just as as an author.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's here to stay.
Mhm.
Well, thank you very much, Jodé.
Well,
Thanks,
I'm-
Jody.
Stop sharing. There we go. Well, thank you. I really appreciate this. This is a lot of fun. You know, it's nice to kind of chew the fat with writers because you're all coming from either writing or publishing or both. And it's, you know, it's nice to have an intellectual discussion about this rather than me just spouting the law. You know, I mean, we
Mhm.
really kind of dug into this a little bit and really chewed the rough edges a little bit.